What's up, guys? Yesterday was a 4-0 day. You like to see it. Finally, have a huge day, a massive monster day, 4-0, all in baseball. My full game baseball totals continue to kill it. I think I'm undefeated in those on the season so far, like 6-0-1 or something like that. I don't know if there's much else to say about that. It looked like it was going to go 3-1, and the Padres finished off the night game pretty nicely. We'll move on to today. We have no NBA today as the play-in games for the playoffs start tomorrow, and I will have one play tomorrow. I don't know if I should just throw that out there now just to get it out there because I don't know if the line is moving on it or what, but I do have a play on the New Orleans Pelicans. You can get them, -1 is still readily available out there right now, so I'm going to be on the New Orleans Pelicans. I'll explain that more tomorrow. Talking about tonight, we do have NHL. Maybe I should start with baseball. Well, I don't know, because baseball, I think there are some afternoon games. The Red Sox, of course, play at 11 a.m. on Marathon Monday, but I'm not going to have a play on the Red Sox game today. I don't see anything really interesting in that one as far as playing the game. I do have a play on the Boston Marathon. It's probably over now, and I don't know how that has gone so far, but I tweeted it out. I don't know if I want to belabor that, but Chebet was the marathon runner who he won the last two Boston Marathons, and he was the favorite in this one, odds on. Nobody was a giant favorite. Last year, there was a giant favorite who was some newcomer, and I was like, you got to go against this guy. You could actually get a no bet on him last year, and I won on that one because he was like a -500 favorite, some Kenyan runner who had never run in the Boston Marathon before. And I'm like, yeah, that price is just ridiculous. Totally value going against him there. He's not in the Boston Marathon this year. The guy who won it the last 2 years is Chebet. He has some of the best odds to win the marathon this year. And it's him up against Lemma, I think was the other guy with the Lemma, I think, wound up going off with the best odds to win it, but I thought that was like recency bias because Lemma did really well in the Valencia Marathon, but the Valencia Marathon is a lot flatter than the Boston one. The Boston one has a lot of major elevation changes, and you have to be like used to it. Lemma has run the Boston a few times before, but has never done better than 2 hours, 20 minutes. And I'm saying this after the marathon is over, so I don't even know what the results are in the marathon this year, but Lemma has not done better than 2 hours 20 in the Boston. So the Boston is not really his thing. So my bet was on the guy who came in second last year, Guy. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. He came in second last year, and last year it was a close second, and his time last year beat Chebet's from the year before that won. So Guy is like, he's an experienced Boston Marathon runner, and he's good at the Boston course. So he was getting plus 225. So I thought that he like pretty clearly had some pretty good value, having the third best odds to win. And I think having like pretty decent odds, like being one of the top two runners as far as those odds there, because I think Lemma was being very overvalued. And Guy was being very undervalued because of a bad performance in the Valencia one. But I think that's fine because maybe that means you're going to go all out in the Boston one. And he's been good in the past in the Boston one. So hopefully that one worked out. But when it's a plus 225 money line, it's like you don't necessarily need to win it. You're just firing and saying, I think this guy has better odds than what you're giving me. Going on to the NHL. The NHL season is ending soon. I guess it doesn't end until Thursday. NBA season, of course, ended yesterday. So we have the playoff matchups set in the NBA and the play-in games. NHL, there are two games where I think there are situations that I like here. One, I'm going to go on the New Jersey Devils. This is a play. It's kind of on the Devils, but it's also against the Islanders. The Islanders look like they're down from -128 to -120 as a road favorite, public road favorite with 81% of the tickets, but 92% of the cash. I don't see how the 92% of the cash is accurate if the line is moving against them. I think there is some money coming in against them. You can find New Jersey at plus 105, plus 110, it looks like right now on New Jersey. the Islanders, I think they're in a letdown spot. I know I played them in the other spot that I thought was a letdown spot off of beating the Rangers. And they still won, but they barely won, and they got taken into overtime by the Canadiens. And I think the Canadiens are winning late in that game. Now the Islanders just had their win streak snapped. Another tough game against the Rangers, and I had that game on, and that was like a crazy playoff atmosphere in that game. The crowd was wild at Madison Square Garden in that one. I believe that was, it seemed like it was a playoff game. The crowd was really, really into it, and there were fans of both teams there in attendance. It was a crazy game, and the Rangers wound up winning 3-2. So both teams played pretty well in that game, I would have to say. It was a tough, pretty physical matchup, and the Islanders come out of that with a loss, losing their win streak, and they're pretty much set for the playoffs at this point. They're still sitting in the 3 spot in the Metro Division. They are 3 points ahead of the next team, which is Washington, who are actually tied with Detroit and Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh 1 point behind them. So it is theoretically possible for the Islanders to drop out of the playoffs, but 2 of those 5 teams are going to get in, and the Islanders obviously have a little bit of padding there with only a couple games left on the season and a 3-point lead. It's highly unlikely that they're going to not make the playoffs at this point. And coming off such a big game like that, I think the Islanders are ripe for a hangover spot here. Whereas the Devils are coming off a loss to Philadelphia on the road. So, yes, they're returning home, but now this is not only their final home game, but their final game of the season. And I think maybe they'll be a little bit even angry because they actually lost the Philadelphia game in a shorthanded goal. And for once, New Jersey actually played defense pretty well in the game, which has been kind of the knock on them. They're also coming off a 6-5 win over Toronto, which was a pretty big win. But I think New Jersey's going to have the motivation here, man. I mean, they're playing out the stretch. They're still putting in effort, pretty obviously, based on their recent scores. A lot of the games have been pretty close. So they have not been a defeated team since they got eliminated. They seem to be playing for their new coach. And this is, like I said, their final game of the season, final home game. They do have a chance to potentially even play spoiler against the Islanders, who are kind of one of the rivals in the New York area to them there. If the Islanders don't win again, and it's possible some of these other teams can move up and knock them out. So I think New Jersey's going to have a little bit of motivation here, and they're getting an underdog price at home. Islanders not in a good spot coming off that really tough game against the Rangers. So I'll be on the Islanders plus 110. And then the other one is going to be on, what am I on? The Pittsburgh Penguins. So let me see. I gotta get this one in here. Pittsburgh Penguins. It looks like you can get them at minus 130 right now. So they are a decent sized favorite. It looks like they have the money coming in on them. They've gone up from, according to pregame, they've gone down from minus 125 to minus 124, but I only see minus 130s out there. They're public with 75% of the tickets on them, maybe just because of the name Pittsburgh, but 97% of the cash. I think this is a motivation spot here where Nashville is coming into Pittsburgh. Nashville, I mean, they are locked in. They're guaranteed a playoff spot, and they're locked into the wild card spot. They're almost essentially locked into the one wild card there because they are sitting at 99 points. They're 6 points out of their division, out of the 3rd spot in their division, which is Colorado. So Nashville, I think it's not possible for them to move up there, so they don't have anything to really play for as far as advancing. And the worst that could happen is they flip wild card spots with Vegas. And then I don't even know how the matchups would work if that was the case, because I don't know if that means that you because it doesn't depend on which division that you're in, because both wild cards could come from the same division. So I think the top wild card is going to wind up in the playing up against the 1 seed that has the lower record, I guess. So Nashville, I guess if they get the top seed or the top wild card, they would play Vancouver as it stands right now and avoid Dallas. So I guess maybe I don't know if that's some motivation if you'd rather play Vancouver than Dallas. I don't even know if you would. And Dallas, very good scoring team, but I think their defense is a little bit in question. So I don't know if they really care that much. Nashville, I think, effectively is locked in to the spot that they're in. They're probably not even going to drop below Vegas with a 3-point lead over Vegas. Nashville coming into this game, they are coming off of couple wins in a row, but over bad teams. So is that going to carry momentum into this game? I'm not so sure. Nashville still, I think, has one more game after this, do they? Or no, this is their last game, actually, excuse me. So for both of these teams, I think they're going to have motivation as far as it being a late season game. This is the last, not the last game for Pittsburgh, but it's the last home game for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got to have the motivation here, though, man. They're in that cluster in the East. They were in the last wild card spot at one point, and now they're 1 point out of that with, like I said, for the last wild card, Washington, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh are all within 1 point of each other. And the Islanders are only 4 points ahead of Pittsburgh in that last spot in the Metro Division. So Pittsburgh obviously has a lot of motivation here. They are getting, it is a favorite price on them. So that's the one thing. Like, if the pressure is going to be on a team, I don't necessarily like laying a favorite price with them, but it is still a pretty short money line price here. So you're still just asking them to win the game here. And that's what Pittsburgh needs to do, of course. That is what they're incentivized to do. They're motivated to win this game here because they are still fighting for a playoff spot. So I'm going to be on Pittsburgh in that one. Moving on to Major League Baseball, there are some leans that I have where I was like thinking I'm almost going to make plays on these. I do like Minnesota, and it looks like there is some heavy market movement. Should I just jump in on that one too? That market is moving heavily with Baltimore dropping from minus 160 to minus 130. They're public with 75% of the tickets on, 79% of the cash on the other side on Minnesota. And I kind of like it because Baltimore's coming off a pretty big win for Burns against his former team, beating the Brewers 6-4. And Baltimore did have to use like a bunch of their relievers. Some of their best relievers had to play in that game. Whereas Minnesota yesterday, they lost to the Detroit Tigers, and now they get to move on and play another game here. They did play a doubleheader the game before that, but yesterday they didn't use as much of their bullpen as Baltimore used yesterday. So I do like Minnesota. Maybe I'll just throw a play on Minnesota here and add another Major League Baseball play here. What can we get them at right now? Can still get them at plus 120. I mean, is that a decent price? I mean, Baltimore has dropped a bit. Let me see here. It seems like I don't know if they were ever minus 160. It looks like they've dropped from minus 140 down to the minus 130 range. So you can still get Minnesota in the plus 120 range right now. And then the starting pitching matchup. So the bullpen advantage rest-wise, I think, is a little bit in favor of Minnesota. And I think the spot favors Minnesota in the starting pitching matchup. You have Louis Varland pitching. He hasn't been that good yet this year. I was on him in one of these games, and didn't work out well for me. He's been giving up too many hits and walks, 13 hits and 5 walks in 9 innings so far this year. 2 whip, that's real bad. 9 earned runs, 9 ERA, that's real bad as well. Does have 10 strikeouts in 9 innings though, but I think something's going to turn around here because, I mean, he has faced 2 good offenses in the Brewers and the Dodgers so far, so not easy teams to face, but over his career, even though, yeah, I mean, I don't like the fact that his ERA is 4.81 in his career and his whip is 1.29. That's not great. Strikeouts are almost 9 per 9 innings, really 1 per inning. Varland, though, has never been seen before by the Baltimore hitters, so he could have a little bit of an advantage there. As I always say, when a pitcher has not been seen before by the opposing hitters, and he's like kind of a young guy that has decent strikeout stuff like Varland does, that tends to be the way you want to look there. And I like it better than what Baltimore's got going. They got Cole Irvin pitching. Talk about stats that aren't very good. His career stats are pretty much just as bad, probably worse than Varland's, and he's an older pitcher, but his strikeout numbers are way lower with 363 and 492 innings, 118 walks for a 3.1 strikeout walk ratio, 4.48 ERA, 1.29 whip. That's bad. This season, 8.1 ERA and 1.9 whip. So bad stats this year. And his stats have been up against, well, Kansas City, who's not very good, and then Boston, who does have a pretty good offense. But he's struggled this year as well, giving up 14 hits, 9 earned runs in 10 innings, 5 walks, 7 strikeouts, and maybe the recreational bettor is going to come look at this and think, well, both of these pitchers suck, but Baltimore's obviously the better team, right? That might be the feeling here, but I think Irvin is actually significantly worse than Varland is. If you kind of just look at their like strikeout rates and strikeout walk numbers and stuff, I like Varland, and Varland being the younger pitcher, I think he clearly has the better stuff. I like him a lot better. And then you look at Irvin up against Who are they playing up against here? Minnesota. Up against Minnesota's offense. Minnesota has a decent sample size, 56 at bats against them. They're 18 for 56 off them for a 321 opponent batting average, although not very many extra base hits. 4 strikeouts, 4 walks. So 321 off of Irvin. Minnesota's been able to hit this guy. Only a 742 OPS, but still, I would much prefer Varland in the starting pitching matchup too. I think you got the starting pitching matchup edge here. I think you have a little bit of a situational edge with the scheduling dynamics here with Baltimore coming off kind of a big win and Minnesota getting to kind of be in like more of a bounce back spot here of kind of an ugly loss to Detroit. Well, not ugly loss. It was kind of a tough divisional game, but still, I think Baltimore kind of in a letdown spot. Minnesota kind of in a bounce back spot. I like the way the market is signaling is all over Minnesota here. Minnesota has the starting pitching edge, and I think they have the bullpen rest edge as well. So Minnesota is going to be that first play. I do lean to Detroit, and they look like they have strong market indicators on Detroit as well, with Reese Olson against Lorenzen for Texas. Detroit's coming off that win over Minnesota. Texas coming off a tough series against Houston where they just lost the last couple. And I think Reese Olson is the much better pitcher in that matchup. That's flipped from Detroit, a 105 underdog, to minus 114 with 68% of the cash on them, 72% of the tickets over on the other side on Texas. The public obviously wants Texas here and not the Detroit Tigers. I like Reese Olson a lot better as far as those two pitchers are concerned. He's got a 1.17 career whip, almost 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, fairly low walk numbers, 2.9 strikeout walk ratio. So I think he's better than his ERA looks, a 5.4 ERA this year, 1.7 whip. The problem I have with this is that he has not been good against Texas's hitters. They haven't seen him much. They're 2 for 6 off him, but they have 6 guys who each have 1 at bat against him. So like a majority of their lineup has actually kind of seen him once before at least, and they have a 333 batting average off of him, and he's only struck out 1 guy. So I don't love that as much as I like the Varland one. And Texas is kind of coming off a loss. But as far as Texas' starter, they got Lorenzen coming in and pitching. His career stats are definitely worse with an ERA in the 4s. He hasn't pitched yet this year either, and a whip 1.32. That's not good. Pretty low strikeout numbers and kind of high walk numbers out of him as well. So I don't like Lorenzen, really. And then let's see. His stats versus Detroit's hitters. Don't convince me to play 5 plays, right? Am I going to be convinced to play on Detroit too here? Let me see here. Batter versus pitcher. I always have to I look at this before I do these videos, but then I always have to refresh my memory. Like, wait a minute, what is the situation here again? He is facing, who are we facing? Detroit. Detroit is actually 9. They only have 3 batters who have faced him before, but they're 9 for 28 off him for a 321 batting average and 831 OPS. So they have more of a track record against Lorenzen. And I think he's at a disadvantage because he hasn't pitched yet this year, whereas Reese Olson has. Fuck it. Let's take Detroit too. Oh man. I can't stop myself. You can get him at minus 110. Actually, let's look at the bullpen situation real quick here. Let me see. Detroit yesterday, what did they do yesterday against the Twins? They probably had to use some of their better relievers. They did use their closer, but they only used 2 relievers. So that's not even that bad, really. Even though their closer is going to be out of the equation. You're in Texas in that game against Houston. The bullpens, I don't think you need to take them out of the equation. I think it's kind of a wash. Texas did also use 2 relievers, so both teams did. So, yeah, fuck it. Take Detroit. The market is heavily indicating on them, too. Then games that I'm really not going to touch these other games. So we do have a weird matchup in Atlanta, Houston between 2 pitchers who both have not been seen before by the opposing hitter. So normally you would want to go on the under on that one with Vines against Eric Getty. I lost on Eric Getty in his major league debut for Houston, but I do think he has good stuff, and he's going to start showing signs that he's better than what that first start was. So I do think you're getting a little bit of value potentially on the under here, but the market is indicating against it. So I can't really do it. But you are getting a better number if you do want to take the under here. And Vines, I think he's worse than Eric Getty. I don't love looking at the reports that I see out of him. Less good than what I hear about Eric Getty, but he has still never been seen before by Houston. So I think both pitchers have an early advantage in that one. The full game total. I also don't really like the spots that the bullpens are in. So I would probably have to make it a first 5-inning total, but those always kind of get dangerous. I think I'm 0-2 on them this year so far, so that's not great either. I'm just not going to do it, but that is the way that I would look in that one, to play some sort of under in that one. But it's up from 9.5 to 10 with 83% of the tickets and 90% of the cash on the under. So it does look like some money is coming in, or on the over. So it does look like some cash is coming in on the over in that one, and I don't quite understand that one. And then you do also have one other guy. There are two other guys making. There are two guys making their major league debuts today. One is Mitchell Parker, though, for Washington, and they're a huge underdog against the Dodgers. The Dodgers have Glasnow pitching. He's been pretty good so far this year. Has a really high strikeout rate. He's coming off an insane 14 strikeout 7-inning shutout performance or something. I don't even remember who that was against, but he's been really good this year. Dodgers really heavy favorites. So the only way I would look in this one is also to the under, and it looks like it's gone down from 9 juice to the under to 8.5 with 88% of the tickets, and this says 99% of the cash on the over, though, which I don't think that's really the case if the number's going down towards the under. I do lean to the under in that one, but and Glasnow, I think, also has pretty good numbers against Washington, if I remember correctly. He's a pretty good pitcher, but I don't like Mitchell Parker, even though he's never been seen before by these major league hitters. He is making his major league debut, but he's only ranked like the 24th or 25th best prospect in Washington's organization alone, so he's not really that highly touted. He is a lefty. He does potentially have some okay stuff, but he's got like kind of a low to mid 90s fastball, a few different pitches. His numbers in the minors aren't really anything that looks great. He definitely walks too many guys. When you walk too many guys, you better have like high strikeout numbers too, man. He doesn't quite have that. You better be able to blow people away with that fastball. I don't think he really has that. I think he really needs to rely on control more, and he doesn't really have it. So I don't want to get involved in his major league debut. But I will get involved in the other game where somebody's making a major league debut. Wait, am I talking about this one next, or am I talking about the other one? I have way too many Major League Baseball plays here now. I think I have 3 more that I'm going to talk about here. Let me see here. Got to look at all these games. And first, I'll talk about San Francisco and Miami. I'm going to be on San Francisco as a road underdog. So this is not the game that I was referring to. The game I was referring to with another Major League debut I'll talk about next. Trying to get through these games fast, man. What am I at here? 22 minutes? All right, we can do this. I'm actually going fast given the ridiculous number of plays I'm on today. San Francisco, Miami. I actually like this one on San Francisco. Even though San Francisco, the market looks like it's against it now. It's gone down on Kyle Harrison on San Francisco from minus 115 to minus 108 with 78% of the tickets on them, only 53% of the cash. And obviously the public's not coming in on Miami here. I don't like that there looks like there's reverse line movement now. Should I not actually play this one? I haven't actually done it yet, but I like the situation in this one, man. I'm going to just buck what I see in the market here. I'll still play San Francisco here, even though the public is on them. Looks like less of the cash is on them. There is now money coming in, going against them on Miami. I don't understand it. I don't like any, I'll explain it because I don't really like anything that's going on with what I see out of Miami here. Miami, they had a series against the Braves, which is really tough. They beat the Braves in the middle game of the series, and then yesterday they had the lead into the 9th inning. They were winning 7-6, and they gave up 3 runs in the 9th inning and lost. They used 4 of their relievers. I believe they had a blown save in the game by their closer. They used like the best relievers they have, basically, the back end of their bullpen. Their bullpen that I don't think is really that good at all. The relievers they brought in yesterday had ERAs 8.44, 5.14, 12.27, 4.7 is their closer's ERA now, but that's including, I think, what he gave up yesterday. But Marlins bullpen really, really has been struggling. But now I think they're going to be in a huge hangover spot because they almost took the series against the Braves. They almost took those last 2 games in a row, and they had the game in the 9th inning and completely blew it. Like, how do you bounce back from something like that? I mean, when you're not a very good team like the Marlins, you got the Giants coming in. I don't know if you're going to pay that much attention to the Giants either. So I really don't like that spot for the Marlins. Whereas for the Giants, I think the spot is better because they just lost pretty badly. It was Snell's debut for the Giants against his former team, Tampa. I think he did play in San Diego in between the two, but he did, I think, start his career with Tampa. So he might have faced Tampa before, so I don't think it was his first time facing Tampa, but he was playing against his former team. He really had a bad start, but then the Giants saved their bullpen almost entirely by having Tang come in for 3 2/3 innings, and then they only used one other reliever, Rogers, for 9 pitches for a third of an inning, and that was it. So they almost saved their entire bullpen, and they got blasted in a loss to Tampa. So I think they're going to be in a bounce back spot, and their bullpen is in a much better situation than Miami's is. So I think San Francisco has the scheduling advantage. They have the bullpen rest advantage here. And looking at the starting pitching matchup, they got Kyle Harrison pitching. He's a young 22-year-old. And this year his stats are pretty good, even though he has a 4.76 ERA. So people might look at that and think, oh, that's not very good. That's a little bit misleading, although the public is still on San Francisco because Miami sucks. They're not going to like anything about Miami. 4.76, I think, is misleading, though, because he has a 1.18 whip. He has 17 strikeouts and only 3 walks so far this year in 17 innings, 17 hits allowed. None of that is bad. It's just the runs he's allowed is bad because he's allowed 4 home runs. If he kept those home run numbers down, his stats would be like really excellent so far this year. Really good strikeout walk ratio. And he's coming off a game where he had 8 strikeouts and no walks against Washington. Although, yeah, it's Washington, but really nice performance in that game against Washington. He's still allowed a home run in that one. He's shaping up to be a pretty good pitcher, man. He's only in his second year. He had 7 starts last year, and over that entire span, he has a 1.16 whip, 52 strikeouts, and only 14 walks, and 51 2/3. I like all that. It's a decent strikeout walk ratio, good strikeout rate, and the amount of innings, a good whip. His ERA is indicative. His whip is indicative that his ERA should be lower than it is. I think it's just those home run numbers. He's just being a little bit too hittable, but he looks like a pretty good young guy with good strikeout stuff, and he's facing a pretty bad Miami offense. They don't really have good hitters on this team, and they've never seen Harrison before. So there you go again. That means Harrison has an advantage early on in the game because these Miami hitters have never seen the guy before. So I like all of that about that. And then Miami on the other side has Edward Cabrera pitching. He's 26, and he has not pitched yet this year. He was in Miami's starting rotation the last 3 seasons. Last year was really his first full season, and over that span, his stats aren't as good. He had a good 2022, but then regressed again last year with a 1.44 whip last year. That's not good, and his ERA was 4.24. Probably should have been higher with a whip that bad. Over his career, 4.01 ERA, which isn't too bad, but 1.34 whip. That's really not good. He has a good strikeout rate, 221 and 197 2/3, but 118 walks. So he is wild, really wild, way too many walks for a pretty bad strikeout walk ratio because of that. So he is a good strikeout pitcher. That's true, but he also, I think he's at a disadvantage in some ways just because he hasn't pitched yet this year. And he's been in the league for a couple years, and if he hasn't been seen before, then I think he's at a disadvantage as well against Harrison, who hasn't been seen before by these opposing hitters. Cabrera actually has been seen before by the Giants, at least some of their hitters. 6 of their hitters have seen him before. So some of these guys on the Giants have seen him before. I would say kind of a majority of their lineup has seen him before, and they're 5 for 16 off of him with 2 home runs and 2 strikeouts and 2 walks for a 312 batting average and a 1.137 OPS, a 1,137 OPS. So Cabrera's numbers not good, really not good against these San Francisco hitters. So all of that lines me up on the San Francisco side here. And the numbers actually dropping. I think the best you can get right now is minus 112 on San Francisco, so we could do that as well. Then we will talk about the game where I was going to talk about a guy in his major league debut, and that is going to be taking the under. I'm going to go full game on this one in Kansas City and the White Sox, which it probably also helps that both of these teams have shitty offenses. You're getting an over-under line that's not that high. I took under 8.5, and it looks like it's really plummeting right now. So the market looks like it's coming in. I don't even know if you could still get an 8.5 now. It looks like it's mostly 8s out there. So might have to get on this one. It looks like this line's moving down, man. It looks like it was 9 juice to the over at minus 120 at one point, and now it's down to 8 juice to the under at minus 115 with 59% of the tickets on the under. It looks like 100% of the cash on the under. I don't think that's quite accurate, but it looks like there is obviously some big money coming in on the under in this one, and I agree with it. I was thinking about maybe playing the White Sox side, which I also do lean to the White Sox side, but I think it's a little bit more dangerous. Kansas City's a very heavy road favorite, and they're favored basically as heavily as they were at home in the game against the White Sox. when they just faced them not too long ago, a couple series ago. So Kansas City probably being a bit overvalued in the market right now. But I think the under is the better way to play this one, just because it might be a little bit dangerous to try to just fire on on a big underdog money line. Again, you might lose. I think the under is the way to go here. I'm playing those big underdog money lines. I mean, I like doing it, but then you're still like you're playing like on a team where you think they maybe have like a 45% chance to win or something. So I kind of prefer playing the under in this one, although Kansas City is public with 82% of the tickets and only 58% of the cash, and the lines move down on them from minus 180 to minus 160. So Kansas City, there is still market movement against them as well. I think the under might be the better way to go here. Kansas City's coming off a loss to the Mets. Neither team used many relievers in that game. We're talking about just Kansas City here, though, and the White Sox. Kansas City only used 2 of their relievers yesterday, so I don't know what we can gain from that. I think that means their bullpen is not in terrible shape here. Chicago, on the other hand, they got wrecked by the Reds. I think they wound up getting swept by the Reds, and it was just really ugly for them. Ugly fashion. They used 3 of their relievers yesterday, but they did use Banks to kind of eat up a couple innings there. So the other relievers they didn't use for that much. So they used 1 long relief guy, and then they used 2 of kind of their better relievers there. Although I guess you kind of don't want to discount using these long relief guys, because if they don't have those guys available, that means they have less available for this game as far as if they need to use a long reliever. We'll see what happens here. But the starting pitching matchup, though, so I don't think either bullpen is in bad enough shape that we can discount like the full game under here. And I think Kansas City's is actually in fine shape. Seth Lugo is pitching for Kansas City, and I know I've trashed him a bit and gone against him a couple times, although this season he's been good as far as his numbers. A 1.45 ERA, 1.18 whip, so he has not been allowing a lot of base runners. 17 hits, 5 walks, and 18 2/3. That's not too bad. And only 3 earned runs. That's very good. Only 9 strikeouts, though, so he's not coming in and striking guys out. He's kind of an older guy, but that's kind of been his thing, man. His whip is actually not that bad on his career. 1.17 on his career with 3.44 ERA, and his strikeout rate on his career is actually better than what it looks like so far this year. 657 and 659 and 2/3 innings for 3.7 strikeout walk ratio with 178 walks. So his stats are actually not really that terrible, although he's had some bad seasons mixed in there. But then the thing that puts it over the top for me is against the White Sox hitters, they're only 7 for 33 off them lifetime, with only 2 extra base hits, both doubles, for a 212 opponent batting average, only a 543 OPS. So the White Sox hitters, I mean, they're kind of bad in general, but they have not been good against Lugo either. He's been able to hold them down, and he's been holding these run totals down. He has not allowed more than 2 earned runs in any game this year, and that was against Houston. He pitched pretty well against these White Sox, where I think I actually went against him in that game. Kansas City actually swept the White Sox in that one, so that would kind of lean to play potentially on the White Sox as well, because the White Sox might be in kind of revenge mode, whereas Kansas City might take the White Sox a little bit lightly because they swept them. But I believe Kansas City is coming off a loss too, so both of these teams kind of coming off a loss. So that might mean that you might get some decent performances out of both of these starters as well. They might be geared up for this game. Lugo pitched well against the White Sox in that other outing against them, allowing only 1 run. He allowed maybe a few too many hits with 8 hits and 6 2/3, and only 3 strikeouts and 2 walks. Hasn't been getting those strikeout numbers up. But these White Sox hitters haven't done well against him. But that start also, factors into those numbers that I just read out. Of course, those numbers from that game are included in those numbers. But still, I like that. Like, he's just been good against these hitters. And then on the other side, what makes this an underplay, Nick Nastrini is pitching for the White Sox. I think he originally was in the Dodgers organization. He's 24. He's making his major league debut, and he's a tall guy, which I also like for the intimidation factor. He's 6'3", so kind of a tall presence on the mound there. If you look at his scouting numbers, he's been pretty good, man. He's been a good strikeout guy. He's had a few lapses in the minors, but where he's kind of walked too many guys at some spots, put too many men on base, but he has been fooling hitters for the most part in the minors and has pretty good numbers, like pretty low ERA, low whip, high strikeout numbers. He's got a few different pitches, pretty high, like fastball that can get into the high 90s, and some decent speed changing pitches. So I like all that. So he's a guy who out of these two starters, of course, now that I say this, I'm going to be completely wrong, but out of these two starters making their debuts today, I think Nastrini has the much better scouting reports on him than the guy who's pitching for Washington. Sorry, I forget his name, Mitchell Parker. So I like Nastrini. I'm playing on all the I like all these Italian guys, man. I like Arrighetti and Nastrini. I like this, man. And of course, with having really good stuff, which I think he does, and being a young guy and having never been seen before by these Kansas City hitters. So I don't think this Kansas City offense is that intimidating. Neither of these offenses really are. I think that's an advantage to Nastrini, who hasn't been seen before, a guy who's been pretty good in the minors, fooling some hitters there. So that's going to be an under. I was able to get that one at under 8.5, but that line's been moving. And then in the final play, I'm going to be on the Seattle Mariners. So I'm going to be on a lot of these games. So the Mariners are up for minus 125 to minus 144. So could have gotten in on a nice low money line on that one. I don't know where it was 125 though, because it looks like it actually kind of opened in the minus 150s range, and it's still kind of in the minus 150, minus 140s range. So I don't know what I'm seeing in pregame, but I'm also seeing Cincinnati has 67% of the tickets, but only 52% of the cash. So we see reverse line movement on the favored Seattle team as a favorite at home against the Reds, who are the public team right now based on kind of their it's probably recency bias, their recent performance. The Reds 9-6 record, pretty good, but they just swept the White Sox and they blew the White Sox out in that series. But I mean, it's the White Sox. They could potentially be the worst team in baseball right now. So I don't know how much you can take away from that. Whereas the Mariners have a horrible record at 6-10, but their schedule has not been easy, man. I mean, they've played the Red Sox, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Toronto, and the Cubs. There hasn't really been a bad team in the mix there. So I think Seattle is better than their record would indicate. And I think this pitching matchup is really going to be in their favor as well. Seattle's coming off a tough game against the Cubs. That's true. Where Seattle was trying to make a comeback and they got close. They only lost 3-2. So Seattle, they used 3 of their relievers. They really didn't use them much at all. Castillo went 103 pitches through 6 innings, and they only used their bullpen for 14, 14, and 10 pitches in those 3 guys that they brought in. So their bullpen isn't like totally burned out or anything like that. So I think that's fine for Seattle. Whereas Cincinnati actually used way more of their pen yesterday in relief of Ashcraft. Even though it was a game where they won by a ton, I think the game was closer in the middle of the game there. And they used a lot of, or actually they used 4 relievers, excuse me, but that I believe is worse than what the White Sox, or excuse me, than what Seattle had to use. They had to use them for 60-something pitches, whereas the White Sox and used 1 extra reliever, a 4th reliever, where Seattle only used 3 relievers and only used them for about 30 pitches. So Cincinnati's bullpen, I think, is in the worst shape coming into this one. And they're having to go out to the Pacific Coast after playing in the Central Time Zone. So they were just playing in Chicago. Now they have to go out to Seattle, which is not really that easy to do. It's kind of a late night game, which based on their like biological clocks, it would be worse if they were coming from the Eastern time zone, but they're still moving 2 time zones over. So it's still going to be like they're playing at like almost midnight to start the game from their time that they're used to in the Central right now. So that's not good, having to go out there to start that first game on the West Coast. These teams moving from east to west actually tends to be the worst in like late night games. That tends to be the worst for these teams' biological clocks. So I think Seattle has a big travel edge there too, because they're not moving anywhere. They're staying at home, and they might be in a little bit of an angry mood here because they've lost multiple games now. They lost the last 2 games. So I think they're going to be pissed, and they're going to be focused on this one. And then to top it all off, you got the starting pitching matchup with Frankie Montas is pitching for the Cincinnati Reds. He's been good this year so far with a 2.16 ERA and 1.14 WHIP. I'm going to go and say that that's a little bit misleading, though. If you look at his career stats, I think his career stats are going to be more of an indicator than what he's done this year, although he has been good this year against 2 like decent teams as well in Philadelphia and Milwaukee. Although in that Milwaukee game was his worst start, where he gave up 3 earned runs. He didn't have a great start in that one. He had a good start to start the season against a Washington team who I think their offense is a bit questionable. So he does have 13 strikeouts and 4 walks this year, which is a pretty decent ratio. and 15 hits allowed in 16 and 2/3 innings. Strikeout rate not terrific. The amount of runs obviously quite good, and the walk rate is pretty low, which is good so far for him this season. But over his career, a little bit worse. 3.85 ERA, which isn't terrible, but 1.29 WHIP. That's pretty high, and that's more indicative of an ERA. I would say kind of like more in the fours. This is also his first season with Cincinnati, so I think he's still maybe kind of adapting, although maybe his coaches are kind of like turning the tide a little bit and helping him out a little bit. He only pitched in one game last year, which was a relief appearance, although he's made 3 starts now this year, so he's getting used to being back in the league, but he hasn't even had a full season since basically 2022, I guess, where he split the time over Oakland and the Yankees, so only one season where he basically didn't pitch at all, but a couple of the seasons in there, he had some numbers that really were not very good. His whip has really not been impressive over his career. He's had a couple of decent seasons in there. His best season was the full season with Oakland back in 2021. But so his career is just kind of all over the place, kind of a mix. But then I think where we land here is that he's worse than what his stats are this year. His season stats, I think, are a little bit of a better indicator. And then versus Seattle, I think this is where you get that puts this play over the top for Seattle, over the scheduling spot and the bullpen spot, which I think both favor Seattle. Montas against them, they're 22 for 74 off them lifetime with 5 doubles, 3 home runs. He does have a 16.5 strikeout walk ratio against them, but still it's a 297 batting average and 828 OPS. So Seattle's done pretty well against Montas. And then on the other side, so I think Montas is not that good against Seattle, and he's worse than what his season stats look like, whereas George Kirby, especially for Seattle, his stats this year, I think, are misleading, and he's much better than his stats are this year. An 8.16 ERA and 1.53 WHIP so far this year. Facing Boston, Cleveland, and Toronto, though, a really, really bad start against Cleveland. The start against Boston was quite good, and then the start against Toronto wasn't that good, but he's faced 3 strong offenses. And over his career, with 2 basically full seasons with Seattle prior to this year, he has a 3.57 ERA, 1.13 WHIP, an okay strikeout rate of 318 and 335 innings, but only 43 walks for a career 7.4 strikeout walk ratio. So his numbers over his career indicative that he's way better than what you see so far this season. So I think the public is coming in and saying, oh, this guy has horrible numbers, an 8-something ERA, and Montas like in the 2s. So, oh man, we're getting Cincinnati with the better record against this bad record Seattle team, and we have the pitcher who's better. Nah, not so fast. Kirby is actually the better pitcher here. Like I just outlined, his stats definitely better on his career. And then against the Reds, they've only 3 of their hitters have ever seen him. So they only have 6 at bats worth against him. Yes, they are 2 for 6 off him lifetime, though, but it's with no extra base hits. He does also have no strikeouts or walks against them. Small sample size. I don't know what you can really take away from that. A 333 batting average, but that means the majority of their hitters have never seen him before. And that's going to do it, man. I think I outlined all that. So NHL, New Jersey Devils plus 105. Or excuse me, plus 110. And what else we got? Pittsburgh Penguins minus 130, and then a whole slew of baseball plays. Minnesota Twins plus 120, San Francisco Giants minus 112, Detroit Tigers minus whatever I said, minus 110. I don't know. I'll look and see what it was. Under 8.5, although I don't think you can get the 8.5 anymore and have to go under 8 in Royals White Sox. And then Seattle. Oh, I'm playing Seattle money line minus 1, the DraftKings alternate money line. This is the range where you want to do it, man, where you have like a minus 150 type of favorite. Instead of laying a price like that, lay minus 1. You can get it at minus 105 at DraftKings. Then you're laying a much cheaper price. But then, of course, so you're still playing on them to win it all. Basically, it's just if they win by 1, you'll push. So you still don't lose the bet. So I think that's where the value lies. I think that's better value than playing them on the much steeper money line price. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm finally going to make take advantage of the DraftKings alternate run lines there with the Seattle minus 1. Let's have a good day, man. It's a lot of plays today, 7 plays. Maybe I'm not being selective enough. Oh boy. Peace.